Hello and welcome to the latest Safer West Mercia podcast. My name is John Campion and I'm the West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'll let my guests introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Marv Choudhury. I'm Sergeant on the We Don't Buy Crime team within the Prevention Hub.
So in this episode we are talking about the work that West Mercia Police does in the We Don't Buy Crime activity. Been around for a while, but focused on acquisitive crime, those kind of crimes that involve burglary, theft, and indeed then the associated harm. We are focused on preventative, how we ensure that either when it has happened, how we stop it happening again, or how we stop it happening in the first place. Been around a while, even predating me, started back in 2015, and indeed when I got elected in 2016, one of those very early on areas where I go, impressive work. How do I support that? And indeed, over the last 7 and a bit years, seen really important changes, and indeed the work being embedded, I think, into those more business as usual type activities. My Safer West Mercia plan, very straightforwardly about reducing harm, reducing the impact of crime, and acquisitive crime and the work in the We Don't Buy Crime team, I think, a central part of that. And we've seen some important changes, haven't we? We've seen crime type in relation to some forms of burglary over that period go down. We've seen a slight rise recently in some forms, but overall we've seen that positive process. So, Marv, probably the first bit to talk about is I briefly mentioned the kind of crimes that we're talking about. But for those listening at home, what is the central focus of your work in terms of the kind of crimes you're trying to prevent?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me and taking the time to listen to the We Don't Buy Crime team, because that's really important for us that we spread the message around what we can do. To answer the question around what is it that we focus on predominantly, it's acquisitive crime. So acquisitive crime in its basic sense is evolves around a theft. A theft has to take place for it to be an acquisitive crime, so taking someone's property without someone's permission. But we often refer to the term serious acquisitive crime, and that sort of defines acquisitive crime a little bit more closely, and it predominantly involves a residential burglary, a personal robbery, or theft of vehicle. So within the We Don't Buy Crime team, we focus on those offence types predominantly from prevention through to detection, and then we've started to wider expand that as well.
There's lots of people in West Mercia, residents in the different communities across the three beautiful counties, will never have heard of it. But they might have seen lots of the blue signs that are out and about across the force area, and might not necessarily connect it with the activity that you and your team absolutely focused on. And that element of prevention, really, really important, because policing is just sometimes seen as responding to when it's happened, isn't it? Well, some of your work is doing that when somebody has been a victim, but it's also proactively out there trying to prevent in the first place.
Absolutely, prevention is massive to me. It's one of my biggest drives of being in the police. I think once a crime's taken place, it's too late. Something's already happened. I'm sure the public want us to try and prevent the crime in the first place. And I've seen a real change in the last 12 months to 2 years within West Mercia. And We Don't Buy Crime really fits within that prevention arena, from early intervention all the way through to that detection later on down the line. The signs that you refer to that hopefully people are seeing throughout the force, that's a key area of our prevention. It's a message that we hope our offenders, our criminals in this area are aware of and are seeing those signs. And when they see those signs, I'm hoping they avoid committing criminality in that area, because they know there's every chance that the crime prevention layers in those areas are quite severe, and there's every chance that they will be caught and apprehended as a result.
So the signs that we've been referring to are relating to smart water predominantly, in terms of smart water being used in that community to protect property. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what smart water is and the role that it has in the We Don't Buy Crime journey, and indeed how the public might see it or indeed access it in their community?
Yeah, of course. So smart water is one of the tactics that we use in the We Don't Buy Crime team, and we've been using it for quite some time now. It's probably worth mentioning that smart water is used internationally by law enforcement agencies. It's not just a West Mercia thing. It's international.
But it's made in West Mercia as well.
Absolutely, yeah, which is really ideal for us, because it allows us to have a really good working relationship with them, and predominantly around innovation. Not all the other forces get the opportunity to visit them as freely as we do, to talk about different products and to discuss ideas around how we can try and come up with other solutions that might prevent crime from taking place. An example of that is our recent tyre tag project. We came up with a bingo-style dabber to try and tackle fly tipping, and that's just one of many different innovative ideas with some of the things you can see on the table in front of us. But smart water in its simplest sense is a fluid. It's a liquid that contains a rare, unique combination of elements that can't be found anywhere else in the world. It's often compared to as being a DNA, so it's a forensic link back to a crime, and we use it in a multitude of different ways, from property marking through to spray systems. And the idea is that if we mark someone's property and it gets stolen and the police find it, we can scan it with a UV torch, and we can then find the unique code by sending it off to smart water, and we should be able to reunite that item of property with the owner. The spray systems have evolved massively. They used to be fitted into stores and still are fitted into certain types of stores, and if a burglar attends that store, they get sprayed and covered in, and that's where you see a lot of the traditional images around smart water of people glowing in a yellowy green spray. But we now have handheld sprays now that we use in nighttime economy, for domestic abuse, off-road and social behaviour, a whole range of things that we're evolving all the time.
It's one of those things that perhaps communities might have heard of, UV pens and all those kind of things. It's a proper big step forward for that type of technology, and it works as well, doesn't it? In terms of there's not just the sense that we're doing the right thing, but there's some academic backing to the work of smart water.
Absolutely, smart water have had hundreds of convictions through the use of smart water, and they will say that whenever a defendant has contested a case at court, every single time that's taken place, they've had a 100% conviction rate. So it's a really robust product that can stand up to the criminal justice system. But more so than that, like you refer to the academic studies that have been done, Smart Water have done their own study, and it says that 74% of acquisitive criminals will not go on to commit an offence when they see that Smart Water logo. So it's really important that we include that within our We Don't Buy Crime branding and signage across the force, because we do think that criminals do know what the logo means. And it's also embedded in our custody units. When people come into custody, they are scanned for smart water, and all of our officers, response officers, SNT officers, all carry an ultraviolet torch. So any property that's found should be scanned and hopefully reunited with the owners. But again, that sits above all of that is we're trying to prevent the crime in the first place rather than detection later on down the line. That's a subsequent angle for us, but we want to prevent the crime before it takes place.
Sometimes people, I think, wrongly think of acquisitive crime or business crime as it's just a cost of either doing business or it's insured, so therefore, where's the real victim in there? But I hear from communities, especially in some of our more isolated communities, of the impact of that crime, whether it's been somebody on their property and stolen something, or they might not then feel safe in their home if it's been burgled. And I'm just interested in your team's work with how you support from I suppose the most serious acquisitive crime of maybe theft of farm machinery worth hundreds of £1,000s all the way down to what's sometimes described as those more low-level incidents.
Yeah, so we've got thankfully, whilst We Don't Buy Crime team is quite a small team that's centrally based within West Mercia, but we cover the whole of the area. We've got a real presence in all of our local policing areas. So we've got our rural and business officers, for example. They're fully trained in the We Don't Buy Crime programme, and they're based locally. And they do really have a focus around engaging with the community, business and rural community, to promote the work of what we're doing in We Don't Buy Crime, but also to look at ways that they can offer crime prevention advice to try and prevent those crimes from taking place. And you rightly highlight that's a rural theft of a tractor. It has far-reaching consequences. A tractor theft in itself, to a farmer, most people might think is a loss of property, but actually it's the knock-on effect to the farming community. If it's a food producer, for example, there's going to be a delay in that produce getting out, which then affects the national economy. So what some people might think is just a simple theft actually has some far-reaching consequences, as you highlight.
I did some engaged with lots of different elements of the farming community, but around lambing season, I was out in South Worcestershire earlier this year, and they'd been hit by a trailer theft. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you think trailer theft, not particularly, but this particular trailer got some very specialist equipment on it that enabled the lambing process to happen more safely and indeed more efficiently. And that equipment couldn't just go and be bought, in another company from insurance. It was something that would take another 6 months to be delivered, and it was really impacted to hear the consequences of losing that bit of kit on that day. But really fascinating in that case that the wraparound support that's happened afterwards to stop the re-victimisation. That's another part of your work, isn't it, in terms of trying to prevent ACE, but also when it has happened, it's not uncommon in inquisitive crime that people will come back to re-victimise.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why there's several elements to the We Don't Buy Crime project, as you will know. But the burglary follow-up process in itself, and your promise to give every victim in West Mercia a smart water kit. We not only visit the victim and offer the kit and the protection through smart water and signage, but we then visit the cocooning properties, the properties either side. And that's one thing that we're looking to expand within the next 12 months to try and capture more of those properties either side to really look at preventing that re-victimisation.
We've seen, we talked about the signs a little earlier, and they're around communities, and we see new smart water villages pop up, and that's part of is to get that focus around certain areas. We get that might work in towns or in some of our bigger communities, but how does that work in some of our smaller, more rural communities? Because it might be a hamlet of a couple of houses, it might be just one farm, might there?
Yeah, so our Towns and Villages project has gone from strength to strength, and we've got, I think the last check was over 170 towns and villages, so parish or ward councils across West Mercia that are now protected by We Don't Buy Crime and Smart Water. And that predominantly works where we have two We Don't Buy Crime coordinators that go out and visit shows and events and visit parish councils and attend meetings and advertise a programme. And that involves our parishes and our wards contributing financially to buy and protect their area from acquisitive crime through buying some We Don't Buy Crime packs, which subsequently get supported. And our We Don't Buy Crime coordinators will coordinate that process with the parishes to really try and protect a particular area. And the benefits of this is that once the signage is up in a small village or hamlet or town, wherever it may be, like I said earlier on, the acquisitive criminals know what it is, and they will potentially go somewhere else and go and commit their criminality when they see that sign, when they know there's an extra layer of crime prevention in that particular area. So it's a really, really good tool, and there's evidence-based again. I think 2019 Warwick Academy University evaluation highlights that We Don't Buy Crime town and village will have a reduction compared to an area that's not protected in the same way. So it has got evidence to support the fact that it does reduce criminality. So it's really a tool.
As Commissioner, a central part of my role is deploying the resources I get for policing and keeping the public safe. And the £600,000 over the last 3 years, I always see as a bit of a no-brainer in terms of investment, because you've just described that partnership that often happens as a result of deploying the kits. In that case, it's not all our resource; it's driven by that community as well. And I think that's really important to build that coalition. I think a central theme of your team's work really for me, in the very best traditions of how we keep our community safe and to see a key crime reduced in the way it has, and the hard work behind it, I think really important. In terms of if anybody listening or those wanted to understand how they might get this type of activity in their community, maybe they haven't been a victim of crime, but it is something that's either a priority in their local area or indeed they might want to explore, how would they find out more how to access it and how to get that more information, and what kind of support would they get?
Yeah, of course. So probably first thing to mention there is that we've got our intranet page. So we've got an internet page which can be found by typing WDBC, We Don't Buy Crime, into any traditional search engine, and we've got a whole raft of information there. But more so than that, I'm a big believer in actually speaking to people rather than doing things electronically. So we've got our We Don't Buy Crime coordinators that will go and visit, like I've said earlier, parish council meetings, shows and events. They cover the whole of the force. And then more locally, we have our rural and business officers, our safer neighbourhood teams that all know about the We Don't Buy Crime project. So I'd encourage members of the public, if they want to know more, to either contact us via our email address, which can be found on the internet page, or contact your local policing teams, safer neighbourhood teams, or rural and business officers, and they can put you in contact with us and we can do the rest.
Because the brand's well known in West Mercia Police, and those local officers and PCSOs absolutely would know, and that's where I really like the fact it's another tool in their toolkit that the organisation supports them with. And I've heard many an occasion where your team has presented to a community or a parish council around the work of We Don't Buy Crime and Smart Water, and you see the audience and they're nodding. And actually, this is how we can empower ourselves to take some direct action. We Don't Buy Crime been around a while in terms of in the organisation, seen some different iterations and different times, and you referred earlier to actually we've seen a great focus on prevention in West Mercia Police and indeed from my Safer West Mercia plan. Looking ahead, where next do you think it is? Where next on our journey about prevention and being better at stopping re-victimisation? Where do you think the continued focus needs to be?
Yeah, I think just one thing that's probably worth mentioning there as well, something we're really proud of within the We Don't Buy Crime team, is that we were the first We Don't Buy Crime team nationally, and now there is several other We Don't Buy Crime teams dotted around the country, and I'm presenting on a regular basis to other forces that want to take on our nationally award-winning programme. So there's a lot of evidence that supports the fact that what we do works. But like you say, moving forward, we don't want to stand still. We want to keep looking at innovation. We want to keep looking at trying to prevent criminality as we move forward. So that relationship with Smart Water is important. We do regularly have discussions with them whenever there's a new crime trend that pops up that we've perhaps not seen before. We will go and speak to them and say, what can we do to try and prevent that? More so than that, we're linked into a range of different best practice sites, and from the College of Policing through to different funding streams that are available that we're looking to resource and buy new products and new innovation that will again add to that prevention layer. But we also look at prevention from slightly from the very early stages as well. So we look at our design out crime officers. We go and speak to building planners, for example, any new builds that crop up. I'm sure listeners will see new builds everywhere these days, and we try and get those crime prevention layers in right from that very early start to try and prevent crime in that way. So the future, we've talked about domestic abuse as well. So we're looking at domestic abuse, what we can do to try and prevent re-victimisation. There's some really good products that hopefully we launch soon to really sort of drive down repeat victimisation and domestic abuse.
Because there is some innovation, isn't there, around the use of things like Smart Water in those circumstances. Because one of the scenarios might be if there is somebody who is a domestic abuse victim and their abuser is ordered to keep away, it's very difficult sometimes to prove their abuser has not been keeping away. So Smart Water is one of those potential opportunities that might prove that the person isn't complying with the directions that they've been given.
Absolutely, it almost fits perfectly into that scenario to provide the victims or survivors of domestic abuse with that layer of prevention, layer of protection, if you like, to prove beyond any sort of reasonable doubt that an individual has approached them once they're sprayed with a solution or once they're marked with Smart Water, and there's very little getting out of that. Other bits of innovation is around the nighttime economy, those spray tags that we're giving to nighttime door supervisors, for example. We're looking to try and drive down violence and the poor behaviour within the nighttime economy.
And that's when somebody is displaying that poor behaviour and maybe gets ejected from the club. They would then have Smart Water tagged on them. Therefore, if they tried to get in somewhere else, they would be marked in Smart Water, and it would trigger a lot of questions from the door staff and the other establishment. Because we do see that, don't we? We see violence or poor behaviour displays from area to area in town centres in nighttime economies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again the main aim of that is that deterrent, that prevention. So when people are queuing up to get into an establishment, they often see door staff carrying an item which they think is that police parva spray, or why are you carrying that? That engages a conversation. So right from the very start, people queuing up to get into establishment will be aware of the product. But then if they then go on to commit that poor behaviour and go on to commit offences within that venue, they can be sprayed, and that will, as you've highlighted, alert other venues within the towns or within that nighttime economy area. But also for us, going back to prevention straight through to detection, when they do call the police to say that this has taken place and they're then sprayed in this solution, it gives us much more powers and evidence to look at a successful prosecution. So it's a really good product.
Really exciting opportunities, and I think the innovation really at the centre of the journey so far, and indeed in the future of the We Don't Buy Crime team. And as I said before, the ability as Commissioner to deploy the resources I have effectively, a no-brainer in terms of the We Don't Buy Crime team and the evidence being in the stats. And so, I want to thank you and your colleagues for the work that you do, keeping our public safe and preventing those crimes. And I have many a case study of where victims who have unfortunately been the victim of crime absolutely recognise the amazing support that they get afterwards, including that sense of how they start to feel safe again in their own space. And that's, we're supported by colleagues in your team, which is really impressive to see. I'm really grateful for those who've been listening today. And indeed, there is lots of information out there, as Marv has alluded to. So not only on West Mercia Police, but also if you Google We Don't Buy Crime, there is lots of information out there. But a genuine conversation with your local policing team on Neighbourhood Matters, another website. If you put your postcode into Neighbourhood Matters, it will show all of your local policing teams and their email address and their direct mobile number. Have a chat with one of your local officers about some of the opportunities and indeed services that we've got for your community, about how we ultimately ensure crime goes down and less people are victimised in the first place. And thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
No, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.